All right, in this video, we are going to go in and refactor some things. And what we originally did, just to refresh things, if you remember, we set up our data model here. I got it open in the top corner here. So we created an RFB user, and really this is a user account. And as we got into the security, I did it because I was using the JDL Studio. And through JDL Studio, I needed to give it an entity for the user. But really what we kind of had a duplicate user entity because we had the JHI user, so JHI user table, I should say, but the user entity. And effectively, all we needed to do here is add in the RFB location and then also the RFB event attendance. So we needed to create that mapping there. And what I want to do in this video is we're going to go through a quick code review, and I refactored it. And what I did is I dropped the entity RFB user and the related Java classes. And I made a deal with Dan when I did this. I'm going to handle the backend code, the Spring side of the code and the entity mapping, and he's going to handle the front end code in Angular. And I just want to go through and review some of the changes that I did here because it is a little interesting. And what I've found is with JHipster, it's great to use JHipster for your initial project kickoff, get things going. We got the data model pretty close, but now we're going to start breaking away from the JHipster automation and really taking the reins here and customizing this application. So to do the first customization we're looking at here is refactoring to take the former RFB user and merge those properties into the user entity. So here you can see down here I've got the local changes up, and you can see that I've deleted the user, the mapper, the repository, the resource, related test, and then also the service layer. So that's about 6 or 7 objects that we've deleted. And let's go through some of the changes. So here on the screen, I do have the user entity up, and I had to go in and add in the properties here and the related JPA mapping as well. And of course, getters and setters. And here, the toString function, I really don't need to worry about that. That's going to be fine for our purposes. And then the other side of it, we had to adjust the RFB attendance and show some of the changes there. So this changed from RFB user to user. So that relationship is there. Let's see here. Also, the Bootstrap class had to add in a couple properties there. Now, the user class requires a password, so I had to set up the encoding. So just to be consistent, I got a hold of the Spring Security password encoder, and that's actually being managed by Spring Security. It is a Spring managed component. So that's an interface that I'm bringing in. I think we can see that. Yeah, so you can see it's a public interface. So Spring Security has that. Spring Boot is probably wiring instance in for us. And you can see here, I had to add in a couple properties because the user class itself does have some constraints. So it does want a password. It does want to have a login property set, and as well as activated. So we're going to set up this user to be automatically activated. And now the rest of it stayed fairly the same. Let's see, take a look at some of the other things here. So the cache configuration changed. So we dropped the RFB user, and now we're just leveraging the user class. And then let's see here. Talked about attendance already. The DTOs also changed, so I had to set up that mapping there, and also the mappers. You can see that I changed over to use from RFB user DTO to the user DTO, so drop the DTO as well. So now we're bringing in the DTO layer also had to change. And then the most interesting part here is these classes here. So now this little trick here, I want to show you where this lives in the file structure. So if I come over here and click this little target, it's going to jump right there. So under Liquibase, we have this master XML. So this is where all the changes are. So I'm going to change this because right now Liquibase is building this up. JHipster has done this for us, but I don't have MySQL database. So there's no permanent database. So this is all temporary stuff. So, but I'm going to modify how Liquibase is applying the changes here to get rid of that RFB user. So you can see here, I just commented these out. Technically, probably should delete them, but commenting out for now is just fine. And then this is going to apply the change log. And let's take a look at this initial schema, some of the things that I changed here. Now, in the initial schema, I'm adding in a foreign key constraint from JHI user to RFB location. So I had to move the create table into the initial schema creation. Technically, if I was, probably could merge all these together into one file, but this is fine for our purposes. Right now, we're evolving our data model, so I'm moving the RFB location into the initial schema create because I want to do this and also set up this foreign key constraint for it. So we've got that all set. So this does set up our data model. And then a couple minor changes here. So this got commented out. I'm going to delete this file before I check in. And made a couple reference changes here. So you can see it went from RFB user ID to user ID. And instead of RFB user, the reference table is going to be here for JHI user. So refactored everything for the data model. And then also the event attendance. We had to add in or change from RFB user ID to just user ID. So just a couple minor changes to our data model. Now this is going to match our mapping. And I am going to go ahead and start this up. Okay, we can see that. Fast forward a little bit, so we got through that, and we can see all the chatter here. We have a lot of chatter, so everything's happy. The database validated, and I am up and running on localhost 8080. Now I want to jump over here to Chrome, and let's take a quick look at this. I'll connect to the database, and we can see that now RFB user is gone. And let's take a look at the user table. And we can see that Dan's gone in and added in a couple properties into the SQL. And just let me show you that real quick as to what JHipster is doing in case you don't know it. It is going to be loading data out of this user CSV. So there's a couple different techniques in play in here as to how we're initializing data. I chose to use the command line runner. Dan added these in here. So we're just showing different techniques here. But we can see now that I do have this user property set down here, our password hash, and we can see that it's built up in relation to the RFB location ID. So everything's looking pretty good on this. Let's see here, clear this. Then we add the RFB event attendance, run that, and we can see that now we have user ID rather than RFB user ID. All right, let's jump back over to IntelliJ. So I want to show you the list of files changed. Let's pull this up a little bit. So you can see that I do have several changes here. So these XML files, these are liquid based. The repository test that changed. I had to drop out the RFB user repository from that abstract test. Cache configuration change. The master, that's what references these other changelog files for liquid base. And then bootstrap change. The event attendance and DTO change, as well as the mapper, and then of course the user class changed. And you can see these, about 7 objects have been dropped from RFB user. So at this point, RFB user has been removed, and we changed those properties and put it into user. And also with this step, we're kind of breaking away from the code generation that's provided by JHipster, and we're taking the reins of the project ourselves, and we're going to be modifying things from here. So kind of a transition point where we no longer depend on that auto generation of code from JHipster.